The notification light on Emma Thompson's workbench had been blinking for 3 days before she finally noticed it. She was too busy sanding the curved armrest of a dining chair to pay attention to anything else. Her small workshop on Luna Station smelled of wood shavings and metal polish, a comforting mix that reminded her of her grandfather's old carpentry shop back on Earth. Emma wiped her hands on her apron and pressed the message button. The holographic display flickered to life, showing the official seal of the Galactic Council. Her heart skipped a beat. Nobody from the Council ever contacted individual humans, especially not furniture makers working in converted cargo bays. "Dr. Emma Thompson," the automated voice began, "you are hereby requested to appear before the Diplomatic Affairs Committee regarding urgent matters of interspecies relations. Your expertise in adaptive design has been recommended by the Human Colonial Authority." Emma stared at the message in confusion. Adaptive design? She made chairs and tables for the small human population on Luna Station? Nothing fancy, nothing high-tech. Just solid, comfortable furniture that lasted decades instead of years, like the mass-produced stuff from Earth's factories. The message continued with coordinates and a timeline that made Emma's stomach drop. She had exactly 6 hours to report to Council Station, which orbited Jupiter's fourth moon. The fastest transport from Luna would take 5 hours if everything went perfectly. She grabbed her toolkit and a few wood samples, not knowing what else to bring. The transport captain, a gruff man named Pete, looked confused when she showed him the council summons. "You sure this is real?" he asked, examining the holographic seal. "Council doesn't usually deal with furniture folk." Emma wasn't sure of anything anymore. 3 hours into the journey, Pete received a priority transmission that made his face go pale. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "we're being escorted in by Council security ships. Whatever this is about, it's bigger than furniture." When they docked at Council Station, Emma found herself surrounded by beings she'd only seen in news broadcasts. Tall, elegant creatures with silver skin walked alongside. Insectoid beings that clicked and chittered in languages she couldn't understand. The station itself was massive, built to accommodate hundreds of different species with varying environmental needs. Ambassador Harris met her at the docking bay. His face was grim and sweat beaded on his forehead despite the cool station air. "Emma, thank God you're here," he said, leading her quickly through corridors filled with alien dignitaries. "We have a situation. The Vorthic Empire has challenged humanity's membership in the Galactic Council." Emma stumbled, trying to keep up with his rapid pace. "What does that have to do with me? I make chairs." "That's exactly why we need you," Harris replied. "They've issued a design challenge. We need to create furniture for the upcoming Unity Summit that satisfies all 47 member species. If we fail, humanity loses access to faster-than-light technology and gets quarantined to the Sol system for 1,000 years. They entered a vast conference chamber where a creature that could only be Vorthak stood at the center. Ambassador Quintal towered 12 feet high, his purple skin gleaming under the chamber lights. His forearms gestured dramatically as he spoke to the assembled delegates. "The humans claim to understand design," his voice boomed through translation. "Speakers, yet their primitive craftsmanship barely serves their own species. How can such limited beings hope to accommodate the sophisticated needs of advanced civilizations?" Emma felt every eye in the chamber turn toward her. Species she couldn't identify stared with expressions she couldn't read. Some seemed curious, others dismissive. The Vorthic ambassador looked down at her with what she could only describe as contempt. "This is their expert," Quintal's laughter rumbled through the chamber. "A single human who works with wood and metal like their ancestors did centuries ago. We have entire factories that adapt molecular structures in real time. We have artists who sculpt with gravity itself. And they send us a carpenter." Harris stepped forward. "Dr. Thompson has created some of the most innovative adaptive furniture designs in human space. Her work focuses on universal accessibility and comfort across diverse physical needs." "Universal," Quintal repeated the word like it tasted bad. "Humans always think small thoughts can have large applications." "Very well, 3 weeks." Create seating that accommodates all member species for the Unity Summit. Fail, and your species remains forever children playing in a single star system. The challenge specifications appeared on holographic displays around the chamber. Emma's heart sank as she read through them. The crystalline helix needed surfaces that conducted specific electromagnetic frequencies. The gaseous drift required containment fields shaped into seating arrangements. The ultra-dense ironback needed materials that could support weights exceeding 10 tons. Microscopic species needed scaling down to millimeter proportions, while energy beings required furniture made of controlled electromagnetic fields. Impossible, someone whispered behind her. Emma turned to see Dr. Rodriguez from the Human Engineering Corps shaking his head. We'd need a team of thousands in technology we don't have. But Emma was already thinking. She'd spent years making furniture accessible to humans with different needs. Tall people, short people, those who used mobility aids, those with sensory differences. The principles were the same, just on a galactic scale. I accept, she said quietly. The chamber fell. Silent, Quintal's 4 eyes widened in surprise. You accept? Alone? I accept, Emma repeated, louder this time. 3 weeks, all 47 species, one design solution. Quintal's laughter filled the chamber again, but this time other species joined in. Not all of them, Emma noted. Some watched her with interest, as if seeing something the others missed. Excellent. The Vorthic ambassador declared, We shall observe your work with great anticipation. Perhaps when you fail, your species will finally understand their proper place in the galaxy. As the delegates began to disperse, Emma stood alone in the center of the massive chamber, surrounded by the specifications for an impossible task. 3 weeks to save humanity's future in the stars. She picked up her toolkit and smiled. Her grandfather had always said the best furniture solved problems. People didn't even know they had Dot. It was time to find out if that wisdom worked on a galactic scale. Emma's temporary workshop aboard Council Station looked nothing like her cozy space on Luna. The sterile metal walls reflected harsh artificial light, and the air recycler hummed with mechanical precision. She'd spread biological data charts across every available surface, trying to make sense of the impossible puzzle before her. The helix data made her head spin. These crystalline beings existed as living mineral structures that required specific electromagnetic frequencies to maintain their molecular bonds. Their seeding needed to conduct energy at precisely 847.2 terahertz, while filtering out harmful interference. The margin for error was less than 0.01% dot across from the helix specifications. Lay information about the drift? These gaseous entities had no solid form at all, existing as controlled atmospheric pressure within. Environmental suits. Their furniture needed to be made of shaped force fields that could contain and support their essence without disrupting their delicate internal flows. Emma rubbed her eyes and moved to the next datapad. The ironback were essentially living rocks, each individual weighing between 8 and 12 tons. They communicated through subsonic vibrations that traveled through solid matter, so their seeding needed to transmit these frequencies without distortion while supporting their massive weight. The microscopic fleck presented the opposite challenge. Each individual was smaller than a human fingernail, and thousands of them formed collective consciousness groups. They needed seeding scaled to their tiny proportions but designed for group interaction and shared decision-making processes. There were the pulse, beings of pure energy contained within magnetic field generators. They didn't sit in the traditional sense but required shaped, electromagnetic environments that could support their consciousness, without causing interference with nearby electronics or other energy-based life forms. Emma set down the datapad and walked to the workshop's small window. Outside, she could see the construction docks where other species were preparing their submissions. The Vorthak had brought an entire construction ship, its massive fabricators, already churning out throne-like structures that gleamed with precious metals and exotic materials. A soft chime announced a visitor. Emma turned to see Ambassador Quintal, entering her workshop, followed by 3 other Vorthak engineers. Their towering forms made the already cramped space feel microscopic. "We thought we should observe the human approach," Quintal announced, his four arms crossed in what Emma assumed was skepticism, "to better understand how primitive techniques attempt to solve advanced problems." The Vorthic engineers spread throughout the workshop, examining Emma's simple tools with barely concealed amusement. One picked up her grandfather's old hand plane, turning it over as if it were an archaeological artifact. "These are your fabrication devices?" the engineer asked through his translator. "No molecular assemblers? No gravity sculptors? No quantum material processors?" Emma watched them poke through her collection of wood samples, metal joints, and measuring devices. "These tools have been making comfortable furniture for centuries. Sometimes the old ways work better than the new ones." Quintal's laugh rumbled through the workshop. Comfortable, such a limited concept. Vorthic furniture conveys status, demonstrates technological superiority, commands respect through sheer presence. "We do not merely create places to rest our bodies. We create monuments to our civilization's greatness." One of the engineers held up a simple wooden joint Emma had been working on. "This connection method might support 50 kilograms at most. Our structures bear tons while maintaining perfect stability across multiple gravitational fields." Emma took the joint back and examined it carefully. The wood was earth oak, aged and seasoned until its grain created natural stress patterns. The joint itself was a modified dovetail that could be assembled without glue or fasteners, relying on precise cuts and the wood's natural properties. "How much does your throne weigh?" she asked. "Approximately 2,000 kilograms for the standard diplomatic model," Quintal replied proudly. "It incorporates 73 different exotic materials and requires a dedicated power source to maintain its structural integrity fields." Emma nodded slowly, then walked to her workbench. She began sketching, her pencil moving quickly across paper while the Vorthak watched in confusion. "You use graphite marking on processed plant matter for design work?" another engineer asked. "Our architects employ holographic modeling with real-time physics simulation across 12-dimensional parameters." "Paper doesn't crash," Emma replied, without looking up, "and pencils don't need power sources." Her sketch showed a simple chair frame, nothing fancy or imposing. Basic proportions that would fit average humanoid forms with clean lines and obvious structural elements. It looked like something that might be found in a rural schoolhouse or community center. Quintal leaned over the sketch, his massive form casting shadows across the paper. "This is your solution? A child's furniture design?" Emma continued adding details to the sketch. Attachment points here, modular components there, adjustment mechanisms that could be operated without tools or complex instructions. "The problem isn't building different furniture for each species," she said, still drawing. "The problem is understanding what furniture really does. It's not about showing off or proving how advanced you are. It's about creating a space where beings can be comfortable, functional, and respected." She tapped the pencil against the paper, thinking, "Your throne tells everyone how powerful Vorthak are. But what happens when a FLEC delegate needs to participate in the same meeting? How do they reach your conference table? How do they make eye contact with other speakers when they're sitting 50 meters below everyone else?" The workshop fell, quiet except for the hum of air recyclers. The Vorthic engineers exchanged glances, their expressions unreadable to human eyes. "Comfort is not the primary consideration for diplomatic furniture," Quintal said finally. "Presence and authority matter more." Emma set down her pencil and looked up at the towering ambassador. "Maybe that's the problem. When furniture makes some people more important than others, it stops being furniture and becomes a barrier to communication." She stood and walked to her collection of materials. Wood samples from Earth, metal alloys from Mars, synthetic compounds developed in the asteroid belt. Nothing exotic or expensive, just materials chosen for their reliability and workability. 3 weeks, she said, more to herself than to her visitors. 47 species. One solution that works for everyone. Quintal's 4 eyes studied the simple sketch on her workbench. Impossible. The diversity of requirements cannot be addressed by a single primitive design. But Emma was already lost in thought, seeing possibilities where the Vortex saw only problems. Universal design principles that her grandfather had taught her, adapted for a galactic scale. The solution was there, hiding in plain sight. It just needed to be simple enough that everyone could understand it. Emma spent the first week studying every piece of furniture she could find on Council Station. She watched how different species interacted with their environments, noting the subtle ways they adapted to spaces not designed for them. The helix. Delegates used specialized conductors to interface with standard consoles. Drift representatives required portable containment fields just to attend meetings. Ironback ambassadors couldn't use most seating at all, instead standing through hours-long sessions. The breakthrough came while observing the station's cafeteria during a busy meal period. A group of Fleck had clustered on a human-sized table, using their tiny tools to access food dispensers designed for larger beings. Meanwhile, a single Ironback stood nearby, unable to join the social interaction because no furniture could support their weight while remaining at a comfortable height. For conversation, Emma returned to her workshop and cleared everything off her workbench. She took out a single sheet of paper and drew one line across the middle. Then she stared at it for an hour. "What if the furniture isn't the solution?" she whispered to herself. "What if the furniture is just the beginning?" She began sketching. Again, but this time her approach was different. Instead of trying to create one piece that did everything, she designed a system. A simple chair that served as a foundation, with modular additions that could transform it into whatever each species needed. The base chair was almost laughably simple. 4 legs, a seat, a back, proportioned for average humanoid beings but with attachment points at key structural locations. The materials were Earth-standard wood and metal, nothing exotic or expensive. Any reasonably equipped workshop could build it, but the accessories were where Emma's real innovation lay. Cushioning modules that could adjust firmness and temperature. Extension platforms that could raise or lower the effective height. Electromagnetic field generators that could be plugged into standard power outlets. Micro-platforms that attached to the main structure for smaller beings. She worked around the clock, building prototypes and testing connections. The modular system needed to be foolproof. If delegates couldn't figure out how to adapt the chair to their needs quickly and intuitively, the whole concept would fail. On the 10th day, Ambassador Harris visited her workshop. He looked exhausted, and Emma realized the political pressure on him must be enormous. "How's it going?" he asked, examining her simple wooden chair prototype. "See for yourself," Emma replied. She demonstrated how the basic chair could be modified with snap-on components. A platform extension here, a field generator there, adjustable cushioning that could accommodate different body types and environmental needs. Harris frowned. "It looks so basic." The other submissions are incredible. The Cogwork are building chairs that adapt their molecular structure in real time. The collective has created a shared consciousness seating array that links participants mentally during discussions. Emma nodded. She'd seen some of the other work in progress. Technological marvels that required teams of specialists to operate and maintain. "But can a Fleck delegate use the Cogwork chair without technical support?" she asked. "Can an Ironback safely sit in the collective array without disrupting the mental links?" Harris was quiet for a moment. "The point is to impress the Council with our capabilities." "No," Emma said firmly. "The point is to create furniture that works for everyone. If we win this challenge by building something that only humans can operate, we haven't really won anything." That evening, Quintal returned to her workshop with a larger entourage. Word had apparently spread about the humans' unconventional approach, and representatives from several species had come to observe. The Vorthek ambassador gestured dramatically at Emma's simple chair. "Behold the pinnacle of human engineering. A wooden seat that requires manual assembly of primitive components." Laughter rippled through the group. A Cogwork representative chittered what Emma assumed was amusement while examining her basic toolkit. "Where are your fabrication matrices?" the machine being asked. "Your adaptive algorithms, your environmental processors?" Emma picked up one of the modular cushions. It looked like a simple, padded rectangle, but she'd spent days perfecting its internal structure. This cushion can adjust to support beings weighing anywhere from 10 grams to 5 tons. It reads body temperature, pressure distribution, and respiratory patterns to optimize comfort automatically. She demonstrated by placing different objects on the cushion. It firmed up under heavy loads, softened for delicate items, and adjusted its temperature based on contact sensors. "The technology is hidden," she explained. "Users don't need to understand how it works. They just sit down and it adapts to them." Delegate Emma didn't recognize stepped forward. The being looked vaguely reptilian but moved with fluid grace that suggested aquatic origins. "May I test your device?" The delegate asked. Emma gestured to the chair. "Please." The delegate settled onto the basic chair frame. Emma quickly attached a platform extension to accommodate their longer torso and added side supports that adjusted to their unique posture needs. The whole process took less than 30 seconds. "Interesting," the delegate said. "The adaptation is intuitive, not technological. Anyone could perform these modifications without training or tools." More delegates began requesting demonstrations. Emma found herself repeatedly modifying the same basic chair for completely different physiologies. Each time, the process was simple and quick. Snap-on components, intuitive connections, obvious functionality. Quintal watched the demonstrations with growing irritation. Simplicity is not sophistication. Any primitive species could create such crude modifications. Where is the artistry? Where is the demonstration of advanced capabilities? Emma looked up at the towering Vorthek. What if the advanced capability is making something so simple that anyone can use it successfully? What if the artistry is in solving problems people didn't even know they had? She gestured to the group of delegates, now chatting comfortably while seated in various configurations of her modular chair system. "Your throne is beautiful and impressive," she continued. "But can it do this?" She began reconfiguring the chair. Again, this time creating a multi-level arrangement that allowed beings of vastly different sizes to participate in the same conversation at eye level. The Fleck delegate could interact directly with the Ironback representative, while energy beings and gaseous entities had their own optimized spaces within the same social grouping. "Anyone can build this," Emma said. "Anyone can modify it. Anyone can use it. That's not a weakness. That's the whole point." The workshop fell quiet as delegates examined the simple yet functional arrangement. Emma could see wheels turning in. Their minds, recognizing possibilities they hadn't considered before. Quintal's expression was unreadable, but Emma thought she detected a flicker of uncertainty in his 4 eyes. For the first time since the challenge began, the Vorthek ambassador seemed less sure of his superiority. 2 weeks left until the Unity Summit. 2 weeks to prove that sometimes the most advanced solution was also the simplest one. The Unity Summit chamber buzzed with nervous energy as delegates from all 47 species gathered for the furniture challenge. Emma stood beside her simple wooden chair, watching crews of technicians set up elaborate submissions from other civilizations. The contrast was stark and embarrassing. The Vorthek had constructed what could only be described as architectural monuments. Quintal's submission consisted of 12 towering throne-like structures, each one carved from rare crystals and inlaid with precious metals that caught the chamber lights like trapped stars. Support crews worked frantically to maintain the complex energy fields that kept the massive structures stable nearby. The Cogwork delegation fine-tuned their adaptive nano-material seating. The chairs shifted and flowed like liquid metal, constantly adjusting their shape based on sensor readings and predictive algorithms. The technology was mesmerizing to watch. Surfaces rippling and reforming in smooth waves, the collective submission took up an entire section of the chamber. Their shared consciousness seating array resembled a geometric garden of crystalline nodes, connected by pulsing energy conduits. When activated, it promised to link the minds of all participants, creating perfect understanding through direct mental connection. Emma's contribution looked pitiful by comparison. One basic wooden chair with a collection of simple accessories. arranged on a small table nearby. No energy fields, no exotic materials, no teams of specialists maintaining complex systems. Ambassador Harris approached, his face pale with worry. Emma, are you sure about this? It's not too late to withdraw and ask for an extension. Before Emma could respond, the testing phase began. Representatives from each species would evaluate all submitted furniture designs, rating them on functionality, comfort, and adaptability to their specific needs. The first test group approached the Vorthek thrones. The crystalline helix delegate climbed onto the smallest of the massive structures, which was still comically oversized for their mineral form. The throne's energy fields, calibrated for Vorthak physiology, immediately began interfering with the helix's electromagnetic frequency requirements. Uncomfortable, the helix delegate reported through their translator. The resonance patterns are incompatible with our molecular structure. A drift representative attempted to use one of the other thrones, but their gaseous form couldn't interface properly with the solid structure. The containment field generators built into the throne were designed for atmospheric pressure regulation, not the specific density gradients that drift physiology required. One after another, species found the Vorthek thrones unsuitable for their needs. The structures were magnificent to behold but functionally limited to beings with similar size and environmental requirements as their creators, the cogwork. Adaptive chairs fared better initially. The nanomaterials flowed and adjusted, creating custom shapes for each species that tested them. But problems emerged quickly. The pulse energy beings caused feedback loops in the adaptive sensors, creating chaotic oscillations that made the chairs unusable. The microscopic fleck were too small for the sensors to detect, leaving them sitting on surfaces that couldn't respond to their presence. Worse, the chairs required constant technical support. When a drift delegate's environmental suit leaked, slightly contaminating the nanomaterials, the entire chair system crashed and had to be rebuilt from scratch. The collective's consciousness sharing array created its own set of problems. Species that relied on individual thought processes found the mental links disorienting and invasive. The Ironback delegate's subsonic communication methods interfered with the array's frequency patterns, causing painful feedback for other connected beings. Emma watched the failures accumulate with growing confidence. These weren't bad designs, they were just too complex for the real world. Too specialized, too dependent on perfect conditions and technical expertise. When her turn came, Emma gestured to her simple chair. Please, anyone who'd like to try it. A Fleck delegate approached first, their tiny form barely visible to most of the assembled crowd. Emma quickly snapped a micro-platform onto the chair's armrest, creating an appropriately scaled surface for the small being. The attachment took 5 seconds and required no tools. Comfortable, the Fleck representative announced. Good proportions for our scale, easy to access. Next came an Ironback, their massive weight causing audible concern among the observers. Emma added a reinforcement platform and adjusted the seat height to accommodate their dense physiology. The chair creaked but held firmly, distributing the massive weight across its reinforced frame. Adequate support? The Ironback rumbled through subsonic vibrations that Emma felt in her bones. Proper height for social interaction. A drift delegate tested the chair next, using a portable field generator Emma had prepared. The gaseous being settled into the shaped containment field, while remaining integrated with the chair's overall structure, but the real test came when multiple species tried to use Emma's system simultaneously. She quickly assembled a modular arrangement that accommodated 5 different delegates at once, each with their own optimized seating while maintaining a unified social space that encouraged interaction. The delegates began talking among themselves, comparing experiences and sharing observations about the different furniture systems they'd tested. Emma noticed something remarkable happening. As they conversed, some of the delegates began making their own modifications to her modular components, sharing techniques and suggesting improvements. A Helix delegate showed a cogwork representative how to adjust the electromagnetic field generators for better frequency response. The cogwork shared sensor calibration techniques that helped optimize the cushioning systems for different body types. Even the usually isolated collective delegates began offering suggestions for mental comfort enhancements, what had started as a furniture test was becoming a collaborative problem-solving session. Species that rarely interacted were working together, building on Emma's basic design to create something better than any of them could have achieved alone. Quintal watched the proceedings with visible frustration. His magnificent throne sat empty and unused while delegates crowded around the simple human chair, modifying and improving it through cooperative effort. "This is not proper diplomatic protocol," he announced loudly. "Furniture should demonstrate the technological superiority and cultural sophistication of its creators, not serve as a foundation for primitive collaborative modifications." The chamber fell quiet. Delegates turned to look at the towering Vorthic ambassador, then back at the functional, comfortable arrangement they'd created together using Emma's modular system. A delegate Emma hadn't seen before stepped forward. The being appeared to be some kind of energy form contained within a crystalline matrix, beautiful and alien but somehow familiar in their dignified bearing. "Perhaps," the delegate said in a voice that rang like distant music, "the purpose of furniture is not to demonstrate superiority, but to facilitate understanding. This human's design does not seek to dominate or impress. It seeks to include and adapt. It invites cooperation rather than competition." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the assembled species. Even some of the Vorthic engineers looked thoughtful, examining Emma's simple components with new interest. Emma realized they weren't just testing furniture anymore. They were testing philosophies, approaches to cooperation and inclusion that went far beyond the challenge itself. The real test was just beginning. The final test required each species representative to present their culture while seated in their chosen furniture. The presentations would be broadcast across the galaxy, demonstrating not just the furniture's functionality but how it influenced diplomatic discourse itself. Quintal had insisted on going first, confident that his magnificent throne would command the respect and attention that Vorthic civilization deserved. The massive structure had been moved to the center of the chamber, its crystalline surfaces catching the light like a trapped nebula. Support technicians made last-minute adjustments to the energy field generators that kept the exotic materials stable. "Behold," Quintal announced as he approached his throne, his four arms spread wide in a gesture of imperial grandeur. "The eternal majesty of the Vorthic Empire, carved from the heart of dying stars and shaped by the will of conquerors." He settled onto the throne with practiced ceremony, his massive form dwarfing the already enormous structure. The assembled delegates watched in silence as he began his presentation about Vorthic military achievements, territorial expansions, and technological superiority, but something was wrong. The throne's energy fields, stressed by the complex materials and the ambassador's dramatic gestures, began fluctuating. Warning lights flashed on the support technicians' control panels. Quintal, lost in his oratory about Vorthic dominance over lesser species, didn't notice the growing instability. "For 12,000 years," he declared, raising all four arms toward the chamber's ceiling, "the Vorthic have demonstrated that might creates right, that power demands respect, that the strong must lead the weak toward the throne collapsed, exotic." Materials shattered like glass under gravitational stress. Energy field generators overloaded and shut down automatically. The magnificent symbol of Vorthic superiority became a pile of expensive debris in the span of 3 seconds, sending the ambassador crashing to the chamber floor with a sound like thunder. Absolute silence filled the chamber. 46 species stared at the fallen ambassador and his destroyed throne. Support technicians rushed forward but could only confirm what everyone could see: the furniture was beyond repair. Emma felt a moment of genuine sympathy for Quintal as he struggled to his feet, his purple skin flushed darker with what she assumed was embarrassment. His presentation was scheduled to continue for another 20 minutes, broadcast live to billions of beings across the galaxy. "Ambassador," she said quietly, gesturing to her simple wooden chair, "you're welcome to use this. Every I in the chamber turned toward Emma's modest contribution. The contrast couldn't have been more stark. Where moments before had stood a monument to imperial power, now sat a humble wooden chair with clean lines and simple functionality. Quintal looked at the chair as if it might bite him. His 4 eyes darted between the simple furniture and the assembled delegates, clearly calculating political costs and benefits. Using human furniture after his own had failed so spectacularly would be the ultimate humiliation, but he had no choice. The presentation had to continue, and Emma's chair was the only available seating that could support his massive frame. He approached the chair reluctantly, his usual commanding presence replaced by visible uncertainty. When he sat down, something unexpected happened. The chair's modest proportions forced him to lean forward slightly, bringing him closer to eye level with many of the other delegates. His posture became less commanding and more conversational. "The Vorthic Empire," he began again, but his tone was different now. Without the throne's imposing height and intimidating presence, his words carried less force and more substance. "The Vorthic Empire has long believed that strength alone determines worth." He paused, looking around at the delegates who were now listening more attentively. Seated in Emma's simple chair, he appeared less like a conqueror addressing subjects and more like a leader participating in a discussion. "But perhaps," he continued, his voice losing some of its imperial thunder, "strength without wisdom is merely destruction postponed. Perhaps true power lies not in dominating others, but in enabling them to reach their full potential." Emma watched in amazement as Quintal's entire presentation transformed. Instead of boasting about military conquests, he began describing Vorthic cultural achievements. Instead of emphasizing their superiority over other species, he talked about opportunities for mutual benefit and cooperation. The simple chair had done more than provide seating. It had forced the proud ambassador to engage with other delegates as equals rather than subjects. Without the throne's intimidating presence, his audience actually listened to his words instead of simply enduring them. When Quintal finished his presentation, something unprecedented happened. Several delegates asked follow-up questions, genuinely curious about Vorthic culture and technology now that it was being presented as something to be shared rather than feared. The remaining presentations continued throughout the day, with most delegates choosing to use various configurations of Emma's modular seating system. The simple furniture seemed to encourage collaboration and genuine dialogue rather than competitive posturing. As the formal sessions concluded, Delegate Supervisor Venka called for the final vote on humanity's galactic membership status. The results were unanimous, full membership granted immediately, with commendation for innovative approaches to interspecies cooperation. But the real victory came later, as delegates lingered in the chamber, reluctant to end conversations that had become more productive than anyone expected. Emma watched species that rarely interacted working together to optimize her modular components for different combinations of users. Quintal approached her as the chamber began to empty. His massive form still towered over her, but his demeanor had changed completely. "Dr. Thompson," he said formally, "I would like to commission 12 of your chairs for the Vorthic Imperial Council chambers." Emma looked up at him in surprise. "You want to replace your thrones?" "I want to replace our isolation," he replied quietly. "For too long we have built furniture that separates us from others, that emphasizes our power instead of our purpose. Your simple chair taught me something today. True strength comes not from standing above others, but from enabling them to stand alongside us." He paused, looking back at the remnants of his shattered throne. "Perhaps there is wisdom in human simplicity that our complexity has obscured." Emma smiled and extended her hand for a handshake. Quintal looked at the gesture uncertainly, then carefully clasped her small hand with one of his massive ones. "I'll make them simple enough for everyone to use," she promised. 3 months later, Emma received her first batch of orders from across the galaxy. Requests for furniture came from species she'd never heard of, each message containing the same basic request: please make it simple enough for everyone. Her small workshop on Luna Station became the center of a galactic furniture revolution. Not because she'd built the most advanced designs, But because she'd built the most accessible ones, sometimes the most powerful solutions really were the simplest ones. And sometimes the strongest empires were the ones humble enough to sit down and listen.